I solved Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, and I believe this game's biggest mysteries and secrets have finally been answered. Now I know that's a big claim, and I'm sure having solved in most of my titles doesn't help either. But over the past month that Secret of the Mimic has been out, I've made a total of 4 different theories attempting to solve different characters, parts of the timeline, and how this game connects to other FNAF games like Sister Location and FNAF 4. So in this video, I'm going to combine all the theories on Secret of the Mimic so far, creating one long video where I break down most of this game's lore that some may have found confusing or complicated. By no means is this my last theory on Secret of the Mimic, but I think it's a good place to start, and I also have other videos in the works as well. So my name is Bronze Films, and let's solve Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, and let's go over everything we know about this game so far. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I really do appreciate all the support on the channel. Jumping right into things, let's not only cover if William and Henry stole the idea of the animatronics from Edwin like the FNAF 1 animatronics, but let's also cover the spring-lock prototype animatronics that can be found, the role Chica's Party World has, and the meaning of the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria and animatronics. For a quick summary of Secret of the Mimic, you play as a new protagonist named Arnold, an employee of Fazbear's Entertainment who has been hired to retrieve the schematics of the original Mimic endoskeleton that was created by Edwin. So going inside of Edwin's manor, Arnold faces the Mimic inside of various different mascots and animatronics, like Jackie, Dolly, an elephant, in-progress mascots, a lion suit, a dog, and so much more. Finally, after reaching 4 AM and after retrieving the schematics, Arnold has a choice of giving the schematics back to dispatch or trying to escape, and one of those ways to escape is the parachute ending. Here, a secret exit will be available which will lead you to the underground area of the manor, or the research and development area, and here is really where the new lore reveals itself. You can first find a prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria. This is a one-for-one layout to what we would see years later in FNAF 1, as they share the same hallways, rooms, and even the exact same office. So inside the prototype pizzeria, you can also of course find the prototype versions of the 4 main animatronics. There's a prototype Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, who all have these specific FNAF 1 designs, not the Wizards, the toys, or any other versions of these animatronics, an important detail I'll come back to later. On top of the 4 main characters, you can also find 2 spring-lock animatronics, Monty and Bub. Monty is of course a reference to Montgomery Gator, a glamrock animatronic that would be used by Fazbear's Entertainment decades later. Bub could be a reference to Bubba from FNAF World, or to Sparky, a dog-like animatronic that was actually just a hoax. So does this mean that originally the FNAF 1 pizzeria had 6 animatronics with 2 of them being spring locks? Or does this mean another location was going to have 4 spring-lock animatronics, Fredbear's Family Diner? Down in the pizzeria we can also find the original prototype versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which is actually one of the few times we've seen canon designs for both these characters, a major reveal. During the gameplay of Secret of the Mimic, there's plenty of evidence proving that Fredbear's Family Diner is open during this time. We find pizza boxes from this location and posters inside of the manor. So based on everything with the prototype technology, it looks like Edwin created designs for all 4 animatronics, including the first versions of Spring Bonnie and Fredbear. And he also has many other prototype designs that Fazbear's would eventually use, like Big Top, who was later used as Music Man in the Pizzaplex, or the Hippo mascot and the Orange Elephant, who are later used as Mr. Hippo in Orville and Pizzeria Simulator. And there's even a poster of Kane the Cadet in one of the offices, as he's again used in Pizzeria Simulator. So did Fazbear's Entertainment or William and Henry steal these designs from Edwin? Well, yes and no. I think it should first be made clear that William, Henry, and Edwin all worked together to create the animatronics, and at one point it even looked like they were all friends. William and Henry would create the actual idea of the character, while Edwin was the contractor for Fazbear's Entertainment, meaning Fazbear's would commission technology to Edwin and he would mechanically make their ideas possible. One group wouldn't be able to work without the other, and it wasn't a direct form of fraud on either side. We know they worked together and were friends because of text logs and audio logs, like this one where William left his initials, WA for William Afton, but I'll get back to the contents of this email soon. Edwin also refers to Henry as Hen, a nickname given to a friend, as we see it here in this log and in one of the audio recordings left by Edwin himself.
Test. Journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
And there's also this recording where Edwin says that they aren't friends anymore, an audio log I will also come back to.
What the hell was that? They treat me like some contractor to crack a whip at. Oh, Fiona was right. They don't think of me as a friend anymore. This is the last project I ever do for them.
So although they did work together and all three of them were clearly even friends at one point, Fazbear's or William and Henry definitely still did steal Edwin's work for their own benefit. Something I'll get back to soon when I cover the last Fazbear project, something that we hear about in logs and in audio recordings. So the first project we hear them working together on is actually Chica's Party World, a location we've known almost nothing about before this point. Here in a text log we learn that a client, or Fazbear's, is very happy with the design, and the Chica design came from Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. So Chica is a character that was not created by William or Henry. She was originally a mascot animatronic created by Fiona for Chica's Party World, and she was also a character created before the other three main characters in the band. In one of the rooms we can also find pieces of merchandise for this location, like cardboard cutouts of Chica and her cupcake, who both originally had roller skates allowing them to move around the location. We also see posters advertising food, pieces of Fiona's heart, and even a promotional video. And this mascot suit is even one of the many characters we see the Mimic wear. It's likely that Chica's Party World was the first time Fazbear's and Murray's costume manor worked together, and it wasn't the last, as we also learn about Fredbear's family diner. In another text log with Fiona, we learn about the new spring locks. Here they are working well even with the water damage and should be ready for the diner soon. The person on the other end then says that they just have to warn Hen about the odd behaviors they might have. With these prototypes, we know William and Henry did come up with the characters originally and only commissioned Edwin for the technology of the spring locks. Proof like Fredbear's singing show tell us these characters have most likely been around since years before even locations like the manor were even open. These are ideas from Fazbear's Entertainment that were not stolen and were only made possible with Edwin's technology. And down in the pizzeria, these are most likely the very first prototype springlock animatronics ever created by Edwin. As like I mentioned, the final products are already in the diner that is already open during this time. These prototypes could even explain the many versions of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, as these first prototypes and designs were probably made by Edwin himself. Designs that do look similar to Nightmare Fredbear and to the sprites from the FNAF 4 minigames. But we also know of the classic designs from FNAF 1 and Ultimate Custom Night, where Fredbear shares a similar design to FNAF 1 Freddy with a purple hat and bow tie. Or the design of Springtrap, who is very different from this prototype, which also includes the official Spring Bonnie model that was scrapped from Help Wanted, which still gives us an idea of what this character originally looked like. So why do they all look so different? Well, like I mentioned, I believe Edwin created the prototype designs, but the final classic designs that Fazbear's Entertainment would eventually use were created by Fiona. Something I've mentioned all videos so far are the FNAF 1 prototype designs, which we know were created by Fiona, which are very specific designs. So what if Edwin created these springlock prototypes, gave them to William and Henry where they approved the technology, but instead preferred Fiona's more classic designs? Which is why we have two sets of designs. One were created by Edwin, and the other, which were used in the actual diner, were created by his wife Fiona. Or it could be a mix of the two, where Edwin did finalize these designs and Fazbear's had a hold of both sets of designs. As in FNAF 4, the sprites do resemble more of Edwin's designs. So Fredbear's family diner would cycle through the different designs whenever one would malfunction or when they thought necessary, as we do find multiple spring locks within the diner. This could also possibly mean we now have an explanation for animatronics like the FNAF 2 Fredbear with a black hat and bow tie, or the Scrap Shop design, which we can now say were created by William and Henry, designs that could have been scrapped and held in a storage room before they hired Edwin as a contractor. Secret of the Mimic is clearly helping us to understand the many different versions of characters and who created them, as when these games were being released and even before this new information was revealed, it was hard to say if all of them were supposed to be the same or if any of the designs were retconned. But now we know they all exist separately and were created by different people, which now finally brings me to FNAF 1 and the downfall of Edwin. We know the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria and animatronics was the last Fazbear project that Edwin was working on, but he was never able to complete it because of William and Henry. Through audio logs, we slowly learn how Edwin began sacrificing all of his time for this project. We first learned that Henry sent an order change from the Springlock animatronics to the normal animatronics, a change that Edwin didn't understand.
Test. Journal entry. I got the change order from Hen last night. None of this makes sense. I'm almost done. Why change it now? It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks. Just hire some teens to wear the suits like we always do.
By this point, we can assume Fredbear's has been open for a few years and has been massively successful, which is why they want to open a new location with new animatronics commissioned for Edwin. But we then learn that Fazbear's kept changing and delaying the final project for some unknown reason, and that suddenly they began to treat Edwin poorly and not like their friend any longer. And this is one of the many times we hear of the struggles with this project.
What the hell was that? They treat me like some contractor to crack a whip at.
Then we learn that Fazbear did approve the art and proofs of the new animatronics that Fiona designed like I mentioned, but then they suddenly changed their mind last minute for new designs, and Edwin even calls these new designs creepy.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design and they're great. Oh, first they approved the art, then they approved the proofs. Now they changed their minds when we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
Could these new designs have been the Wizards, which would be used in the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza where the missing children incident took place? But regardless, we can assume Edwin kept working on this project and would lose everything because of it. Through the text logs and audio logs, we learn that Edwin would begin to lose employees, money, and every other customer due to working on this project. As what really ties all this together are Edwin's words himself, where he says the change orders are essentially destroying his life.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
And after the death of Fiona and David, Edwin's son, he would lose everything, which is also where the M1 and M2 program have a role in. But this family and their dynamic is something I'll discuss in a future video, as now we can start to look at where Fazbear stole ideas from Edwin. Based on these audio logs, it looks like Fazbear's purposely delayed and changed the project so Edwin would dedicate all of his time to it, allowing the rest of his company to crumble and fail. Which would most likely then allow Fazbear to legally be able to take all of Edwin's assets and creations, because he never finished the project that he was commissioned for. And all of this is the work of William and Henry. Henry of course wanted to transition from the spring locks, and we can assume they both delayed the project together. And while Edwin and Fiona worked on the animatronics, William was behind the scenes destroying his company. Throughout yet another audio log, we learn that Edwin fired traders that stole his work and sold it to someone else, who we can assume was William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We also learned that there was a leak, where someone told Fazbear about M2 and its function, and here we can confirm the leak was in contact with William with these text logs. Here William is attempting to gather the remaining contacts of the employees of the manor, and even promises the leak that he would make a manager of one of their new locations, if he gave him the information he wanted. Now who the leak is and how it also connects to FNAF 1 can be a video on its own, so for now it's clear William was planning to betray Edwin from the start and was never his friend. So for one final text log, we see Fazbear's Entertainment's plan work, as we learn they were able to take everything from the MCM catalog since Edwin was so behind on their project, and that they now technically own Edwin's land. They say they won't touch Edwin's house since it belonged to his father, and that they even want to keep him as an engineer. This email comes directly from William as he leaves his initials once more, and it looks like since the start William has been manipulative and immoral like we've all theorized he's been throughout the franchise. And this also begs the question, did William and Henry both have a role in Edwin's downfall, or was it only William? Well, this is where the evidence is more loose and a lot more assumptions are made. We have clear evidence William wanted to take over, but is Henry also guilty? Did he make a change order to Edwin to purposely delay the project, or did he really just want to move on from the spring locks and work on something different? It could honestly go either way, but based on how Henry's portrayed in the books and in Pizzeria Simulator, personally I don't think he knew Edwin was losing his company because of the project, unlike William. But again, this can be taken either way, so what do you guys think? But now for the last thing I want to cover is a quick overview of the timeline and how it led to FNAF 1, where we saw the final prototypes. Edwin and Fiona worked on projects for Fazbear's Entertainment like Chica's Party World and the Springlock animatronics for Fredbear's Family Diner. But after being commissioned for one final project by Fazbear's, William and possibly Henry kept delaying the project purposely so Edwin would fall behind, causing him to lose clients, money, and even his friends. After the death of his wife and son, and after M1 and M2, Edwin would go missing, allowing Fazbear to legally take all of the MCM catalog, including his land. Fazbear's then creates new pizzerias and even uses one of Fiona's own original characters, Foxy, who was originally Pirate Foxy, a puppet who was a part of an automated show for guests of the manor. Then years down the line, after William and Henry most likely stopped working together, where William Afton worked on Afton Robotics and Henry Emily created a smaller location on a smaller budget, the prototypes came back. Because Henry would still have the MCM catalog after all these years, to save time and money, Henry would repair the Willards to match the style of Fiona's designs and blueprints. He would even use hers and Edwin's design of the prototype pizzeria, using the same hallways, offices, and main stage. Something else I wanted to point out about the prototype pizzeria is the fact that it has the same map and layout of the FNAF 3 location as seen here. So could this finally be confirmation that the FNAF 3 and FNAF 1 location are the same? But back to the timeline, and after even more time has passed, Henry's planning to open one last location. He looks back to the MCM catalog for ideas like the mediocre melodies, including a purple hippo and orange elephant, or a candy cadet who tells stories. Then, even after more time has passed, Fazbear's Entertainment looks at the MCM catalog one last time for the creation of the Pizzaplex, where they use ideas from Fiona and Edwin to create new animatronics like Roxy and Monty, a puppet and Springlock who existed decades earlier. They also repurposed Big Top to Music Man and even used the Mailbots again as Stuffbots. So Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic can explain the many different animatronics that have felt out of place for when they were revealed. It can tell us who created what animatronics, when animatronics were around, and it tells us about a family who had their empire taken away by a single man. Moving on, I'm now going to cover how William stole Edwin's life to use in his own twisted experiments, and I'm also going to cover how all of this is connected to Fall Fest 1970 and even to the Pizzaplex from FNAF Security Breach. So is this really the FNAF 4 house? Are all FNAF locations connected by one forest? And was William already experimenting with Remnant before his sister location? So jumping right into things, in one of my last videos where I attempted to prove that Fall Fest was the key that connected all pizzerias, I went over the idea how almost all pizzerias and locations from the franchise that we're all familiar with are all in the same general area, with some locations even being built on top of previous ones. We first learned that the Help Wanted Dreadbear DLC takes place within the Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983. This carnival has a lot of important details to note, starting with this house off to the distance. If this house looks familiar, that's because it's actually the Afton family house from FNAF 4, as it has the exact same shape and layout, where the house sits on a hillside surrounded by trees and a forest. This small detail reveals to us that Fall Fest has always been near and right in front of the Afton family house this entire time, and of course I'll come back to this when I discuss William. But we could also find this car in front of the monitors that looks like a simple truck with white headlights to the player, but you can actually change the truck's headlights by pressing a hidden button which will turn the car's headlights purple, which is an obvious reference to the minigame Midnight Motorist. From this confusing minigame, it's assumed that this house is the Afton family house and that orange guy is actually purple guy who's driving a purple car. The same purple car from the Charlie minigame in FNAF 2, and the same car we see in the Dreadbear DLC. The headlights turn purple, which is a clear reference to the purple card Midnight Motorist, which not only makes these cars the same, but it also makes this setting and location the same as well. This confirms the Midnight Motorist house is the Afton family house that we find in the distance and surrounded by a forest, just like in Midnight Motorist. So if the cars and houses are the same, then what does this mean for Fall Fest and the setting in Midnight Motorist? Well, when lining up the layouts of the minigames for Midnight Motorist and the Dreadbear DLC, the only place Fall Fest and this barn could be is in this clearing where we find this pile of dirt, which to me makes perfect sense, as it's a wide enough area for the carnival and the pile of dirt could be here to represent where the barn used to be. Meaning we now know Fall Fest has to be near the Afton house, and in this specific clearing next to the barn and next to the Midnight Motorist car. But the connection to Fall Fest and to other locations doesn't stop there. When looking at the Help Wanted secret ending, we find a tease in Setup 2 Security Breach, where we find the Pizzaplex is under construction and is hiring, but that's not all. To the side of us and behind us, we find the exact same car and barn that we could also find in the Fall Fest 83 event. The two cars are the exact same truck and even have the same imperfections in the exact same places. The barns also appear to be identical with their similar shape and overall design. The barn is to the left of the car just like it is in the Dreadbear DLC. They are clearly meant to be the same thing in the exact same area, which would also mean the Pizzaplex was constructed right in front of what would have been Fall Fest. But by this point in the timeline, Fall Fest is nothing but a simple clearing in a forest. But this would confirm that the Afton family house is somewhere off to the distance of the Pizzaplex. We even find the similar hills and mountains from the Dreadbear DLC where the house would have resided. So how does all this connect to William Afton and his big secret? secret? Well, we can find that answer through Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, the latest FNAF project released just last week. Here the game takes place at MCM, Murray's Costume Manor, which is a giant warehouse and contracting business that would have created mascot suits and technology for companies like Fazbear's Entertainment and for events like Fall Fest. But I want to focus on the building of MCM and on the exterior of it, as taking a closer look at the outside of the manor and at the surrounding area, we find that the manor is surrounded by a forest, and to the side of the manor and on top of a hillside we find yet another house. That's right, MCM in Secret of the Mimic takes place in the exact same area I've discussed all video. It's surrounded by the exact same forest we've seen in the Dreadbird DLC and in the secret ending of Help Wanted. It's surrounded by the exact same mountains and hills that are no coincidence, as I believe this was also to connect MCM to other locations from the franchise. And of course we find the same house, the house that sits on a hillside surrounded by trees, but there's one major difference. This house is not the same house as the Afton family house. Yes, it's in the exact same area, but here in 1979 when this game takes place, this house or mansion actually belonged to Edwin Murray. Here we learn that Edwin's father left this house to him and that it would eventually become his home with his wife Fiona and his son David. Edwin would even connect an underground tunnel right from the house to the basement of the MCM warehouse, where he could travel back and forth and could work on his costumes simultaneously. But after his wife and son both died, and after he would create the M1 and M2 program, Edwin disappears or is even killed by the Mimic endoskeleton, which then leads us to the events of FNAF's Secret of the Mimic. And in one of the 3 endings for this game, we see a fire burn down the warehouse in the connecting mansion, which is where William Afton comes in and takes over Edwin's life and property, including the house. Throughout the game, we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his company. Through audio and text logs, we learn that William was in contact with a leak from MCM who gave him the contact information of all of the employees of the company. And we also know that other employees sold Edwin's work to most likely William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We then learn that William and Fazbear's Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. In the research and development area, we can find the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria that had the exact same hallways, offices, and stage. Of course, there are also the prototype animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, alongside the FNAF 1 endoskeletons. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's, but was never completed by Edwin purposely.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approved the art, then they approved the proofs. Now they changed their minds. Well, we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
So after delaying the project over and over, Edwin would lose his friends, money, and after the death of his family, he would finally lose his company and everything he's built.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
And for one final text log, we learn the entirety of the MCM catalog and properties have legally been passed over to Fazbear's Entertainment or to William Afton, meaning this mansion now belonged to him. But like I mentioned in the parachute ending, which is now widely being regarded as canon, we see the mansion being burnt down. So what if after the fire, William would save what was left of the mansion and remodeled it to the FNAF 4 house we all know and remember? During the good ending, where Arnold is able to reset the Mimic's programming to mimic David by playing him a bedtime story, we get a glimpse of David's room. And of course, this room is almost identical to the main room from FNAF 4 where all nights take place. They share a similar blue carpet, cabinets, and even patterns on the wall. But the closets where the Mimic and Foxy both come out of are almost identical. And most importantly, they both share the exact same toys. Toys that we've only ever seen in the FNAF 4 house and that are once more returning in David's room. This just can't be a coincidence, and I think it's here to tell us that they are the same. So after the MCM fire, William would fix what's left of the mansion and would even create it into a smaller house with the same toys and same style of room. But why? Why fix Edwin's mansion? Well, I believe it was for his experiments, a room dedicated to William's test subjects with the nightmare animatronics. We know that the FNAF 4 house and that this house shown in the minigames for this game are not the same. Here the house is in front of a playground and is in front of some road. There is also a sidewalk connecting it to Freddy's family diner where the Bite of 83 took place. So lining this house up with everything we know about the FNAF 4 house and even with the house for Midnight Motorist, there are just simply no similarities. This house isn't on a hillside surrounded by forest and it is connected to a pizzeria, unlike the house from the Dreadbeard you'll see and from Secret of the Mimic. So William would have his real house near Fredbear's family diner where the FNAF 4 minigames took place, and after Secret of the Mimic he would have a second house dedicated to his experiments that no one would know about. That could also be why none of the rooms from the minigames match up with the room from the actual nights, and we learn about William Afton's experiments from the tales from the Pizzaplex novels. Now I know they've basically been proven not to be canon with new evidence from Secret of the Mimic, but we can still use them to help us prove claims, like with Didophobia. Here the story focuses on a boy named Rory who is facing real-like nightmares of the nightmare animatronics from FNAF 4. He's repeating the same night over and over before he realizes the house isn't even real and is able to escape through a vent. There he finds gas tanks of hallucinatory gas that was making him see the nightmare animatronics. But in reality, they were just mannequins on rails that would activate each single night. But he then finds himself in an underground bunker which is none other than Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, as he finds rooms from Sister Location and even the Funtime animatronics. So based on this story, it appears that William Afton has been experimenting on children in this fake house built on top of the Sister Location bunker. The nightmare are just hallucinations that would come from gas from the underground bunker. Meaning if we follow the same logic with this house from Secret of the Mimic that would eventually become the FNAF 4 house, the underground tunnels that are connecting the house to MCM would actually become the Sister Location bunker. Meaning after the fire, not only did William remodel Edwin's mansion to the FNAF 4 house, but he would also remodel the underground area into the Sister Location bunker that would become Circus Baby's entertainment and rental with the Funtime animatronics. We can even find tanks of some sort of gas in one of the cameras in the bunker, and of course we also find cameras inside the FNAF 4 house, where William would most likely watch his experiments take place. And all of this would make even more sense, since it would be hard to believe that William would create an underground bunker under his house. But if a house and underground tunnel already existed for him, then all he would need to do is remodel them both for his liking and experiments. William could have learned of this underground area from one of Edwin's employees, which would have been one of the many reasons William would want to take over Edwin's properties and assets. But what does this mean for his experiments? In the books we know the experiments were to study the psychological effects of fear in children, but what if we could also connect it to Remnant? Remnant is described as a type of energy substance infused with the souls and memories of those who possess the animatronics. So what if William was attempting to recreate the effects of Remnant on living children through these real-like nightmares? Now what William was planning to use Remnant for is something we don't really know anything about, and it's just up to everyone's personal preference based on evidence and speculation. It could have been to bring animatronics to life, for immortality and eternal life, or just to simply understand how these souls possess these machines. But either way, we know William had some knowledge on Remnant based on these Scooper blueprints, which would actually inject Remnant into different things, and it's what most likely kept Michael Afton alive. But Secret of the Mimic might also actually tell us how William Afton knew about Remnant and possession long before Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals was ever opened. Throughout this game, we can find bodies of different employees from Fazbear's Entertainment who were also sent to retrieve the Mimic but failed. They would be stuffed inside of mascot suits just like how William Afton stuffed the victims of the MCI into different animatronics. So did one inspire the other, and why are both events so similar? Well, we know the bodies of the mascot suits had to come before the MCI, as this game takes place in 1979, while the missing children incident is believed to happen at the earliest in 1983. 4 years after the events of this game, meaning either one of two things happened. It's possible that William was notified of the Mimic stuffing bodies inside of suits, and that this action had ghost-like possessed results, which would inspire William to try and recreate these moments with the MCI where he is successful. Or it's possible that William visited MCM and found these bodies scattered around the warehouse, which would cause him to stuff the bodies inside of the mascot suits for some unknown reason, where the Mimic would then see this action and would mimic it, stuffing other bodies into suits and even the protagonist, Arnold, in the prototype animatronic and the bad ending. But no matter what way you look at it, this moment right here, this is most likely the first time William ever witnessed the effects of Remnant and how souls could possess inanimate objects. Those bodies in mascot suits would then cause him to remodel Edwin's house and underground area into a fake house and underground bunker, where he could experiment on children and try to recreate the effects of Remnant with fear. either to make himself immortal or to bring his technology to life. So what's William's big secret? It's the fact that he turned a tragedy of innocent people being stuffed into mascot suits and used it for his own advantage by turning another innocent man's life and empire into an experiment. He would turn this man's house and basement into a lab where he would experiment and torture children to try to recreate what he saw in that warehouse and what it did to those mascot suits. Years later, it would even inspire him to recreate the tragedy with children by stuffing them into animatronics, where their souls would then possess those machines. Now I know that may all seem far-stretched, especially since I'm basically saying that William Afton was inspired to cause the MCI from the Mimic's actions and not the other way around. But based on Edwin's mansion and everything we know about the FNAF warehouse, I think it's hard to ignore that these areas are the exact same, meaning William had to remodel these buildings to what we know they are today. And knowing that bodies were stuffed inside of mascot suits since 1979, it's also hard to ignore that this moment was either the very first time or one of the first times that William learned about Remnant and about possession. But there are some things I want to clarify to help back up my claims, especially about this general area I've talked so much about. Earlier I discussed how Fall Fest has to be in front of the FNAF warehouse, meaning it also has to be in front of Edwin's mansion. But looking around we find nothing, and if anything it looks like Fall Fest 1970 was rather far away from MCM, as in an audio log we learn about Fiona having to go to Fall Fest for some unknown reason.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
But something happened at Fall Fest, something that killed Fiona. Now it's most likely that this was a fire that might have even been caused by William Afton, but the Fall Fest fire is a topic for another video.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
So I personally think there were two Fall Fests, the 1970 era of the Fall Fest, which was somewhere else separate from the FNAF warehouse and MCM, where a fire would take place destroying the carnival and everything in it. So the 1980s era of Fall Fest would take place here, in front of the FNAF warehouse and in front of the remains of MCM. There are even lakes around the forest and area around the warehouse, similar to the lake we can find near Fall Fest 1983, which is why we don't see it here in 1979, as the fire had most likely just happened. But now I want to look at the manor, as if we continue to line up this area with the area from the secret ending of Hope Wanted, this would mean that the manor is actually the Pizzaplex. And for those who have been keeping up with the channel for a while now, I've made a few videos theorizing how the manor is under the Pizzaplex. I went over red bricks from the sinkhole that could have only come from MCM, the mascot suits that appear decades old that have never left, and even 1970s style TVs found in the Pizzaplex. But now the secret of the Mimic being released, I think the biggest piece of evidence is this Freddy head. In Security Breach, when first going down to the sinkhole, we find this giant Freddy head, and we actually find the exact same Freddy head in the research and development area of MCM. These two Freddy heads have to be the same, and we've only seen these two Freddy heads in these two games. Which would mean that the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria is actually the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place location from FNAF 6 that we find under the Pizzaplex, which makes perfect sense. When Henry is attempting to open one final location, he could have remembered that an old contractor had a testing location already made for him. And like I mentioned, the MCM catalog was already legally passed over to Fazbear's Entertainment, which would allow Henry to remodel the location to the FNAF 6 location and include animatronics from MCM, like the mediocre Melodies, as we saw Mr. Hippo and Orville in the warehouse, or even Candy Kadzette as we saw this poster in one of the offices. So now when looking at the entire area, here's my personal map or picture of almost all locations in the same place. In the middle we have the Pizzaplex, which is on top of the FNAF 6 location on top of Murray's costume manor. To the left we have Edwin's mansion, which is actually the FNAF warehouse, which is on top of the 6 location bunker. And in front of the manor we have the 1980s era of Fall Fest. So Five Nights at Freddy's is reshaping what we knew about the early era of the franchise and how all of the pieces fit together. Now let's go over how Secret of the Mimic finally revealed the identity of Mexis by going over different possibilities to who this character is and how they've become a crucial character to the overarching timeline. So who is Mexis? Who created this program, and will we ever see them return in a future FNAF game? Jumping right into things, when looking at all of Mexis' appearances, Five Nights at Freddy's Ruin introduced a new character officially named Mexis. Mexis is an AI designed to keep the Mimic contained and served as a secondary antagonist to Ruin. This program takes on the form of a shadowy rabbit with disembodied arms and a ghostly tail, as electricity connects the joints to their arms. But Mexus only appears while the Vanny mask is on. So after having the mask on for too long, Mexus will appear, doing poses reminiscent of Glitchtrap. However, this can happen at certain points in the game as Helpy attempts to deactivate them. Mexus does have a major role throughout this game, and the most important thing to note with this character is what we see occur in the final segment of the gameplay. When Cassie reaches the bottom of the sinkhole where the Mimic is being trapped, she disables the Mexus system by deactivating this machine using this computer. We see Mexus come out of the supercomputer to confront Cassie before he's sucked back into it and is shut down. Then after the Mimic reveals himself to Cassie, it's revealed by Gregory that the Mexus system was actually the only thing keeping the Mimic trapped or contained. But now that Cassie disabled him, the Mimic was able to walk free and to escape. Then in FNAF Help Wanted 2, when playing the Secret of the Mimic update, you can unlock this character model of the Mimic in the mascot lion suit, which will unlock a door that was previously inaccessible. Here you will find Jackie's box, and after opening it, you will find two different puzzles. So after unlocking all puzzle pieces for both images, you will find that the puzzle while wearing the Vanny mask reveals a funhouse or circus type of building, with what appears to be a factory right behind it, which we now know is MCM from Secret of the Mimic. And without the Vanny mask, the puzzle will reveal a blue van, which is actually the Fazbear's Entertainment work van. But again, when collecting them all, the funhouse building will actually appear right in front of you. So when taking a closer look, in front of the building there's a code that reads 4625. But when taking the Vanny mask off, you will now find the blue van right in front of you with the doors open revealing the Mexus machine inside. And now when taking a closer look at Mexus, there's another small keypad, and when inputting the code from the funhouse, Mexus will appear and the ending will finally play. So in this ending, we see Mexus reveal himself before the blue van drives off. And finally, in FNAF Secret of the Mimic, we do see Mexus return, but in a way I'm sure many of us hadn't anticipated. In the parachute ending and in the research and development area of MCM, we discover the same supercomputer I've mentioned earlier, but implemented with a much different program, F10-N4, which is actually just M1. M1 was created by Edwin to babysit David after his wife Fiona died, and this program perfectly replicated Edwin's wife. We even see this video of M1 mimicking Fiona during one of David's birthday parties.
This is great. He's gonna love it. Fiona, did you make this?
I baked it myself for David's special day.
Well, great job. You just continue to surprise me. All right, I think we're ready. Okay, everyone hide. Fiona, go get him. I left him out at the playground.
It's also worth mentioning when this program or Fiona begins to talk to us, the monitors behind the computer display the exact same icon of Sun from Moon.exe, which is most likely saying that they're one and the same, but you can watch this video to how they're connected and how they're connected to Fall Fest. But we learned that M1 was impersonating Dispatch to prevent Arnold and the data driver with the Mimic schematics from leaving the building. F10-N4 does this by hijacking Arnold's communications and pretending to give him instructions, taking it from place to place within MCM. It seems to want Edwin to fix them too, another Mimic program chasing us throughout the game. It also tells us to head to the main house and activate the communication sub-terminal, as there's a message for Edwin.
Head to the main house and activate the communications sub-terminal. I have a message for you. We must convince him to repair M2. That is all that I want. If you do not, M2 will never stop pursuing you. Tell Edwin, I still love him. Entering standby mode.
We actually get a total of 4 different messages from F10-N4, and we know they are from this program as we can associate these binary numbers with these messages. We first get 2 messages about home, with the first one reading, home, my home. The second message reads, Edwin, are we losing our home? I don't understand. Wasn't I good enough? It appears that M1 genuinely believes it's Fiona and not just some program. With her voice line, she of course tells Edwin that she loves him and feels saddened by the fact that she was shut out by Edwin and left alone in the basement. It also looks like M1 has no idea that Edwin has gone missing after the explosion in his office and that David has also passed away. Even with the latest message, she refers to Edwin as alive. Even in the elevator, the program believes it is talking to Edwin and not Arnold. And with the third message, it reads, Edwin, please talk to me. We need to stop it together. Here are the blueprints for the cradle. It can keep David safe and provide boundaries. It's a type of computer and it's bigger than anything you've done before. If you won't finish the program, consider building the cradle. It will keep people safe. Here we learn about Cradle, a program that will help stop M2 or the Mimic, and when you reach Edwin's office, we learn that the Cradle program is actually MEXIS, which we now know stands for Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage Number 1. So this is a separate program from F10-N4 that we see in Ruin and Help 1 and 2 like I discussed. So all of this brings up a lot of important questions we need to try to start answering. Are there two different supercomputers? Is F10-N4 actually MEXIS? If not, what happened to F10-N4 after FNAF's Secret of the Mimic? How did MEXIS end up in the Pizzaplex, and why is MEXIS designed as a blue bunny? Well, before we can answer any of those questions, I want to welcome a special guest who's going to answer if Fiona is actually possessing the M1 program. So please take it away, Vraar.
Hello everybody, my name is Vraar. Thanks again, Bronze, for having me on here. So now that we have a general understanding about F10-N4, it seemed obvious that we'd start theorizing on whether or not Fiona is possessing the Mimic. Essentially, is this AI actually Fiona, or is it just a very advanced AI that Edwin created? This whole discussion is extra intriguing to me because there's a great deal of sound arguments supporting both sides of the question. On one hand, if Fiona is possessing the Mimic in some manner, just the fact that Edwin has to tune into a certain frequency, specifically 4625, to hear Fiona's voice, this already creates an out-of-the-ordinary expectation, I guess, as to what's going on here. None of the other audio logs are anything like this. Let's listen to the line from this audio log that Edwin hears when he tunes into this frequency.
That's good, honey, but sing the party.
This is clearly a pre-recorded Fiona line that we hear elsewhere in the Secret of the Mimic game. That doesn't make this any less strange though. One more point to bring up as evidence for Fiona's voice being ghostly in nature and not simply an AI that's talking to Edwin is the fact that we find this audio log down near where the tiger costume appears. And the tiger costume haunts us in a manner very reminiscent of Golden Freddy, which feeds even more into the idea that some sort of possession might be in play for Fiona as well. If the audio log is found in this area, it's reasonable to assume then that something ghostly is going on here. As well as this, Five Nights at Freddy's has always had a taste for supernatural activity throughout the many stories we've been given over the years, whether it be in books, movies, or games. And that in itself gives us more validation to suspect that there's something more at play here. I do like to play devil's advocate though, so on the other hand, one thing to keep in mind is that the Mimic pulls a very similar stunt in Ruin, using Gregory's voice lines from Security Breach to trick Cassie into freeing it. There is a counter to this, that while F10 starts out using pre-recorded lines, later on in the game this character does seem to have a mind of its own, telling Edwin that they need to keep this a secret between the two of them for now. This seems vastly different than the initial audio we first hear of this digital Fiona. But the last thing I want to touch on to argue against this being some supernatural thing and not just an AI is the fact that Edwin himself, hitting an emotional low one day, finally snaps at this Fiona-like bot and says the following.
For the last time, no, it wouldn't be him. Oh, who am I kidding? You're not really you. I've been so stupid.
Edwin, calm down and give it some thought. Try again. Make another, and we can all be together.
All this time wasted? I should have been having fun with him, playing games and teaching him how to make things. But I didn't. You, I let a machine raise my kid. You're not real. What was I thinking?
You do not mean that. It is me. I'm Fiona.
Stop talking like her. You're not her. I never want to hear or even think about you ever again. Ever!
So what this audio log seems to be telling us in relation to Edwin is that Edwin had to convince himself that this truly was Fiona. But after listening to this audio log, we realize Edwin himself ultimately knew deep down that this wasn't actually Fiona, and this makes him snap, because in reality, this was just a mimic. But that clearly isn't where F10's story ends, and the debate doesn't end here either. This is Five Nights at Freddy's after all. Things aren't always as they seem. With that being said, I could talk about this topic for well over an hour, so back to you, Bronze.
Thank you so much, and everyone make sure to check out his channel because he has amazing theories that I really do think you would all enjoy. But looking back to the questions, is F10-N4 and MEXIS the same program and computer? Well, I think the safe and obvious answer is no. M1's purpose was to mimic Fiona, and it does exactly that, while Mexus was designed to keep the mimic contained in a boundary, two very different purposes. And we can assume that one wasn't changing to the other. F10-N4 specifically gave Edwin blueprints for Cradle, which would be something separate, not just changing or upgrading the programming. But what about the computer itself? Are these two separate computers with two different programs? Well, I don't think so. First off, this would honestly just make things much more complicated than it needs to be. Why have two computers that we would need to keep track of? That would have to mean that Edwin created the F10-N4 program and computer, while someone else created Mexus and that different computer. So what happened to F10-N4? Did someone take it? Is it still in the manor? Who built Mexus? Who took it to the MCM? Again, it raises more questions than answers them, and it makes more sense that it's just one computer with two programs, meaning F10-N4 was changed and put somewhere else and replaced with Mexus. That's why it looks like this computer never left. It looks decades old because it is. It's the exact same one we see in Secret of the Mimic in the basement, just with a different program. So what does that mean for the M1 program? Well, I believe it was implemented somewhere else, in an animatronic that we've all overlooked and forgotten about. But that's a topic for another video. That's right, I'm having you all wait until the next video to find out. But now, how did Mexus end up in the Pizzaplex, and who implemented this new program into this computer? Well, like I mentioned earlier, I think it makes the most sense that this computer never left. It wasn't delivered to the Pizzaplex or to the sinkhole, it's always been there. Meaning that the MCM building is under the Pizzaplex and always has been. For those who have been keeping up with the channel for a while now, I've made a lot of videos theorizing how the manor is under the Pizzaplex. I went over red bricks from the sinkhole that could have only come from MCM, the mascot suits that appear decades old that have never left, and even 1970s style TVs found in the Pizzaplex. But now with Secret of the Mimic finally being released, I think the biggest piece of evidence is this simple Freddy head. In Security Breach, when first going down to the Pizzaplex, we find this giant Freddy head, and it's actually the exact same head in the research and development area of MCM. These two heads have to be the same, and with these two games, these are the only times we've seen this Freddy head. So I really do believe that these rooms are the same and that Mexus was never moved, especially with Fazbear's Entertainment attempting to remodel and excavate the sinkhole. But you may be wondering, in FNAF Up 1 and 2 we saw Mexus being moved in the blue van from presumably MCM, meaning it hasn't stayed in the manor all those years. Well, when going live a week ago, I think one of the viewers gives a perfect explanation for this ending. Mr. 3D Gaming proposed the idea that this ending was representing Mexus in the form of the blueprint being in the data driver and it being taken away from the manor by Arnold. Arnold does escape with the Cradle blueprints in what's being regarded as the canon ending, and it's the thing that the Mimic takes back after stopping him from escaping, something I'll get back to soon. So instead of looking at this as something that literally happened, we can instead look at it in a metaphorical sense, where it was showing us the Secret of the Mimic ending where Arnold attempts to escape with the Mexus blueprints, which is why we even see the van drive off in such a hurry just like in the actual ending. But that still begs the question, where did the Mimic go with Mexus in the data driver and how did it end up back in this computer? Well, I believe the Mimic is heading home after this ending, the only home it's ever known, MCM, which is connected to Edwin's mansion, and there he would run into none other than William Afton. Throughout this game we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his own company. We learn that William and Fazbear's Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's but was never completed by Edwin purposely. He made Edwin lose everything and would even take over his own home after the fire from the ending I just discussed. When comparing Edwin's mansion to the FNAF 4 house, they're surrounded by the same trees and forests and sit on the same hillside. They are clearly meant to be the same. So what if while William was remodeling Edwin's mansion, he would run into the Mimic with the data driver? Because this is advanced technology, of course William would want to get his hands on it for profit. So somehow he would get back the data driver and would implement the Mexus program into the computer he would find in the MCM basement. That's right, William would technically create Mexus. After setting up Mexus, he would keep the Mimic held in the boundary that was MCM, which would allow him to experiment with this endoskeleton, which could even be why we see similar technology implemented into the Funtime animatronics, as in the blueprints we see some of them have the same ability to mimic others. But after being screen locked and locked in a room for 30 years, the Mimic would be abandoned and kept trapped by the Mexus program, which was now in the computer. Now I know that may seem far-stretched, as when deciding who implemented Mexus can honestly go either way. So what really made me come to this conclusion is the design of Mexus, a blue bunny. Now this is a design choice that we can't really connect to any other character. Henry is related more to Fredbear, Edwin to any of his mascot designs, and even Fiona would be connected to characters that she designed, like Puppet Foxy or Mascot Chica. A bunny has always been a way to represent William, so I think the same would apply here. And after learning about his role in Edwin's life, it just makes even more sense. He would simply be the most motivated to implement Mexus into this computer because he wants to keep it captive so he can experiment from it and profit from it just like he did with all of Edwin's designs. So when looking at the timeline of Mexus, Edwin would create M1 to mimic Fiona and to babysit their son David. But after creating M2 to mimic David, he would implement the M1 program into a supercomputer that would then be known as F10-N4. Then during the events of Secret of the Mimic, F10-N4 would give blueprints of the Cradle program that is also known as Mexus to Arnold, who would download these blueprints onto the data driver and would attempt to escape MCM. But the Mimic would stop him and would take back the blueprints. Then the Mimic would run into William Afton, who's remodeling Edwin's mansion, which was also the Mimic's home. William would then take the blueprints and would then make it a reality, even giving the Mexus program his signature bunny design. A similar design we see with characters like Spring Bonnie and Glitchtrap. He would keep the Mimic contained to learn from it, but would abandon it after being spring-locked. The Mimic would be held captive for nearly 50 years until he was let free by Cassie, who disabled the Mexus program. Now I do want to emphasize this video is just a theory. By no means am I saying that anything in this video is confirmed, especially because this theory has its flaws, but that's just theorizing FNAF for you. It could be possible that there are two computers or that Mexus is F10-N4, but based on the evidence I do believe there's one single computer with two separate programs. Now I do also believe we'll see Mexus in a future FNAF game, especially one that takes place in the Pizzaplex once more where Cassie and Roxy are returning to defeat the Mimic. And finally, let's cover what exactly happened in the 1970s Fall Fest Carnival that led to the death of an innocent person while another succeeded from it and continued to build his empire. So let's go over the Fall Fest fire, who caused this fire, and how all this connects to the greater lore of the franchise while also solving some of the biggest mysteries like Midnight Motorist. But jumping right into things, we first saw Fall Fest in the Hope Wanted Dreadbear DLC. This DLC featured a Halloween themed hub mode consisting of 3 new game modes that contained 10 new minigames all focused around this Halloween theme. We were also introduced to brand new animatronics like Grim Foxy and Dreadbear himself. And most importantly, we learned this DLC also takes place within the Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983, an important year for the franchise. We then saw a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the Hope Wanted 2 game hub, as we can assume that the carousel minigame focusing around Moon where you have to fix the carousel while avoiding him, and the Carney minigame where you shoot at targets with a phaser blast for points, both took place in the Fall Fest Carnival itself, and up to this point we would only get more references and Easter eggs to this carnival. In Security Breach we found this arcade game of Balloon Boy which took place in a carnival, this poster advertising Fredbear's singing show. In Ruin we saw these carnival animal mascot suits, and we even see the Mimic wear a carnival lion suit in the Scooper ending. We could also find these prize boxes with the same pattern as the Secret of the Mimic carpet found in the teaser trailer and in the Hope Wanted 2 update where we found Jackie's box, meaning these prize boxes were teasing this new game this entire time and this time period, as we also know Secret of the Mimic would take place in the year 1979. And now finally, with Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic being released, we have concrete information on the Fall Fest Carnival, how it's connected to Fazbear's, and its eventual downfall, which is the big mystery we all missed. This game is centered around MCM, Murray's Costume Manor, a contracting business owned by Edwin that would create mascot suits and technology for companies and events. One of these companies was of course Fazbear's Entertainment, who commissioned various projects like Chica's Party World. This is the first project we hear of them working together on, a location we've known almost nothing about before this point. Here in a text log we learn that a client, or Fazbear's, is very happy with the design and that Chica's design came from Fiona, Edwin Murray's wife. We also learn about Fredbear's Family Diner, as in another text log with Fiona, we learn that the new spring locks are working well, even with the water damage, and should be ready for the diner soon. We also learn about a prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria and animatronics that Edwin was also working on for Fazbear's, but he was never able to complete them because they kept delaying the project on purpose. For full context on the animatronics and how they fit in the timeline, you can watch this video where I deep dive into the possibility that William and Henry did steal Edwin's work. But finally, we of course learn that MCM was commissioned to work on Fall Fest. We find the same Fall Fest 1970 poster from Hope Wanted 2 alongside collectibles from the actual carnival. We find a Snow Global Fall Fest that looks similar to the promotional art for the event featuring animatronics and even the puppet as a scarecrow. We even find an admissions ticket for Fall Fest, a ticket with the same colors from the poster and something we've never really seen before. On a whiteboard we find the number parade floats made for different companies including Fazbear's, who has the second highest number of floats on the list. So we can assume that parade floats based on different characters were in Fall Fest since we don't really see them anywhere else in the franchise. And like I mentioned, it's assumed we already saw 2 exact attractions from Fall Fest 1970 and Hope Wanted 2. Meaning there was a Phaser Blast type of attraction that included the Carney animatronic that could have possibly been created by Edwin for Fazbear's, Fazbear's, which could also mean that the other Rockstar animatronics were also part of the MCM catalog, which is why we see them show up once more in FNAF Pizzeria Simulator. And I think we can say the same about the Carousel minigame, as we know Moon was created by Edwin. But here we find the Moon animatronic from FNAF Security Breach. So what if this version of Moon was just a placeholder and not the actual animatronic we could find in the 1970s? Instead, it makes sense that the Moon mascot from Secret of the Mimic was the character featured with the carousel, a mascot suit any performer could wear, and it's even theorized that a person is inside of the Moon mascot during this segment. But most importantly, we learn that Edwin's wife Fiona, who was responsible for Chica's design and even for designing the FNAF 1 prototype animatronics, decided to go to Fall Fest with the installation team because she felt that something was wrong.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
This Fall Fest trip was only supposed to last a week, but as we learn in another voice log, Fiona never returned and Edwin was forced to raise David completely on his own.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David. Oh, how am I supposed to tell David that his mother is gone? How am I supposed to raise a kid on my own? His life is ruined. My life is ruined.
But how and why? How did Fiona die at Fall Fest, and what caused her to never return back home? Well, to find out, the first thing we know for almost certain is that a fire killed her, the 1970s Fall Fest fire. In both Help Wanted 2 Fall Fest minigames, both levels end with a secret level where the attraction catches fire. With the carousel minigame, you face Jack-O Moon while fixing the carousel once more, but in the middle of the minigame, a fire will randomly start engulfing the attraction and Moon slowly. But eventually you fix the carousel, ending this section of levels. With the Carney minigame focus on FNAF 2, after completing the level like normal, the arm of the cardboard cutout of Dreadbird will snap off, causing electrical sparks to go flying, which will also cause a fire. The fire will spread across the wagons and even to Carney himself, which will end the minigame. And in the FNAF 3 Phaser Blast level, where we see the aftermath of the fire while defending yourself against Springtrap, you'll find that the wagons and even Carney himself have been completely burned with nothing in the attraction left. So it appears that a fire brought down Fall Fest, meaning we can assume it's what killed Fiona and anyone else who was there. But how? How did this fire start, and more specifically, who caused it? I think it's safe to assume that it wasn't an accident, especially because Fiona had a bad feeling about it from the start. Before this game was released, I personally thought that the Mimic would have been responsible for the fire, as the main animatronic being promoted was Jackie, a clown-based character who we can clearly connect to a carnival. But here we learn that the M1 program was only created after Fiona's death, as it would have acted as a babysitter for David before he was killed as well, which obviously eliminates the Mimic as being someone who caused the fire. So really, in my opinion, that only leaves one other person who was mentioned quite a lot throughout the gameplay, William Afton. Throughout this game, we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his own company. Through audio and text logs, we learn William was in contact with a leak from MCM who gave him the contact information of all of the employees of the company. And we also know that other employees sold Edwin's work to most likely William.
Attention traders, admin wing permissions have been revoked. And no, you can't clear out your desks. You stole my work. Now your jackets, purses, and coffee mugs, and anything else belongs to me. Maybe I'll go find someone to sell your stuff to. How does that feel?
We also learned that William, or Fazbear's Entertainment, kept delaying the project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF 1 location. In the research and development area, we can find the prototype FNAF 1 pizzeria that had the exact same hallways, offices, and stage. Of course, we also can find the prototype animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica, alongside the FNAF 1 endoskeletons. This project was commissioned by Fazbear's but was never completed by Edwin purposely.
Aren't they insane? The look of these new animatronics is Fiona's design, and they're great. Oh, first they approve the art, then they approve the proofs. Now they change their minds. Well, we're so close to final. Why would they change them now? Are they pulling my leg? The new concepts are frankly creepy. No, it doesn't matter. I'm not changing a single bit of her work, and they can't make me.
So after delaying the project over and over, Edwin would lose his friends, money, and after the death of his family, he would finally lose his company and everything he's built.
I feel stupid recording this, but I just hope somehow that you can still hear me. I can't do this alone. The change orders are killing me. Our employees, my friends, they keep leaving. The money's gone. I just need to finish the new Fazbear project, and then everyone will come back. We can get back to normal. I miss my friends. Our friends. I miss you. I miss you more than you'll ever know.
Clearly, William is successful in taking over Edwin's life. So what if, to make sure that Edwin's life would crumble and he would lose everything, what if William killed Fiona with the Fall Fest fire? William could have been the one who made it seem like something was going to happen at the carnival, which would then force Fiona to go because of a bad feeling. Then at Fall Fest, he would start a fire killing Fiona, which would be one of the many dominoes to fall in Edwin's life. And I think the first major piece of evidence is the carousel minigame that I just discussed. In the final level, when looking at it from an outside perspective, we can actually see that the fire started in this barn and that it spread out to the rest of the attraction. So what if William was inside that barn? He would start the fire where no one would be able to see him and would then disappear. Fiona would be somewhere else in the carnival helping the installation team, and most likely didn't know if fire started until it was too late. And it appears that Moon.exe actually confirms this. Moon.exe is a minigame accessible through the helper terminals and acts as a way to tell a story about the Murrays. It's theorized that we play as the Mimic, who is being held captive in his room by Moon, who most likely represents Edwin. However, you can escape this room, which will allow you to take various paths, eventually completing it. On your way, you can rescue a baby owl, which most likely represents David, and you can also run into Sun, who we can confidently say is meant to represent Fiona, who is described as the old woman inside of the rundown cabin in the woods. We know this for certain as we face the F10-N4 program, which is the same as the AI also known as M1, which, like I mentioned, was created by Edwin to babysit David. F10-N4 perfectly replicated Fiona, so there are some theories speculating that Fiona possessed this program. But that's a topic for another video. So when this program or Fiona begins to talk to us, the monitors behind the computer display the exact same icon of Sun from Moon.exe, which is most likely saying that they are one and the same and can be used to represent one another. And when looking back to the minigame, we find statues that are clearly supposed to represent Edwin and Fiona, but Fiona's statue is burnt with the Fall Fest globe collectible that I mentioned earlier right in front of it, which to me could imply that the statue or Fiona was burnt by a fire that occurred in the event in the snow globe, Fall Fest. And on top of that, you can also find a seamstress building that has been burnt to the ground, another way to show Fiona was in the fire, as we know she loves sewing together hand puppets, like the Foxy Crew hand puppets we see in the theater. And finally, when facing Big Top and handing him the Fall Fest admissions ticket that I mentioned earlier, he says, "This is the one. This is where Sun left, leaving them behind." I think it's obvious that this is yet another way how the game is telling us how she dies. The one is the Fall Fest Carnival, where Sun or Fiona would leave to but would never return from, as she then leaves Edwin and David behind like I already mentioned. We might even be able to predict exactly what year this Fall Fest fire took place. When looking at this chart of Murray's Costume Manor's net earnings, we see a rise in profits around the year 1972. But then suddenly in the year 1973, net earnings crashed and continued to decrease all the way to the year 1975. So I think we can safely say that some tragedy is what caused MCM to lose money, a tragedy that would kill many people including Fiona, the Fall Fest fire I've mentioned all video. And with all that said, I think it should be made clear that there are most likely two Fall Fests, the 1970s era of Fall Fest that was burned and the 1980s era of Fall Fest as well. In the Dreadbird DLC, we see Fall Fest 1983, meaning the carnival had to continue after the fire in another location. We actually know that Fall Fest 1983 was in front of the FNAF 4 house, which is Edwin's mansion, which is also near MCM, and you can watch this video explaining how that's possible. But Fall Fest 1973 seemed to be a lot further since Fiona had to take a week-long trip, so again these two can't be the same. So Fiona was most likely killed in the 1973 Fall Fest fire, which was a fire purposely caused by William Afton to ensure Edwin's life would crumble, which would then allow him to come in and take over his company. He would take his technology, his designs, and even his own house. And with all of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember, this video is just a theory and nothing is confirmed, so what do you guys think? Make sure to comment down below any thoughts or theories. Also make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you guys so much for watching.